Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to the course Principle in Animal Life 1. This is lecture number 30. The topic is an overview of protein functions. Discussing agenda for the topic will be enzymatic proteins, defensive proteins, storage proteins, transport proteins, hormonal proteins, receptor proteins, contractile and motor proteins, and finally structural proteins. Lecture outcome. After watching and listening this lecture, students will know about different functions performed by proteins in the body. Introduction. Proteins are made up of individual building blocks called amino acids. Proteins are chains of amino acids. They perform several functions in the body. Here we will discuss some of the important functions performed by proteins in the animal bodies. The first is enzymatic proteins. Enzymes are biological catalysts. They speed up chemical reactions. Enzymes has an active site where a substrate binds and thereby the substrate is broken down and the reaction is catalyzed. Example is digestive enzymes which catalyze the hydrolysis of bonds in food molecules. Hydrolysis is a reaction in which a polymer, a macromolecule, is broken down into monomers and water is required in this process. It takes place in the presence of water. The second is defensive proteins. Defensive, just like the name suggests, these proteins defends the body against the invading pathogens. Example of defensive proteins is the antibodies. Antibodies are produced in response to invading pathogens or antigens. Those antibodies attach with the pathogens and thereby neutralizes them or destroys them. Storage proteins. The function of the storage proteins is storage of amino acids. Casein is an example of a storage proteins which is present in milk and is the major source of amino acids for baby mammals. Plants have storage proteins in their seeds. Ovalbumin is the protein of egg white used as an amino acid source for the developing embryo. Transport proteins. We have discussed transport proteins in quite a detail in our topic on the plasma membrane. These proteins are embedded in the plasma membrane and are responsible for the transport of materials across the cell. Another example of the transport protein is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is an iron containing protein. It is made up of 2 alpha and 2 beta chains and it is present in blood and responsible for the transport of oxygen throughout the body. Other proteins transport molecules across plasma membrane shown here. They are embedded in the plasma membrane. Hormonal proteins. Hormones are the chemical messengers. Hormones are released by ductless glands. Those ductless glands are located throughout the body, and those ductless glands make up the endocrine system. They releases their secretions directly into the blood, and the blood travels throughout the body. So the hormones have specific receptors throughout the body where they bind and induces their effects. And the function of hormonal proteins is coordination of an organism's activities. Example of hormonal proteins is insulin. It is a hormone secreted by the pancreas, and it causes other tissues to take up glucose, thereby regulating the blood sugar concentration. Receptor proteins. Receptor proteins are present on the surface of the plasma membrane. Receptor proteins are also the ones which we term as glycoproteins. These proteins interact with molecules in the immediate extracellular vicinity, and they have specific binding sites where the molecules bind, and thereby the effect of the incoming signaling molecules is induced. Receptors built into the membrane of a nerve cell detect signaling molecules released by other nerve cells. Contractile and motor proteins. These proteins make up part of the muscles, the actin and myosin, and those proteins are responsible for the movement because the muscles are attached with the bones, and the contraction and relaxation of the muscles is responsible for the movement. Motor proteins are responsible for the undulations of cilia and flagella. They are also present there. Actin and myosin proteins are responsible for the contraction of muscles. Structural proteins. The function of these structural proteins is to provide support. Keratin is the protein of hair, horns, feathers, and other skin appendages. Insects and spiders use silky fibers to make their cocoons and webs respectively. Collagen and elastin proteins provide a fibrous framework in animal connective tissues. This was the end of the topic. This is the reference book from where all the slides have been prepared. Thank you very much for your time. Allah Hafiz.